what the Saints does for the community as a whole, it rallies us towards a common cause.
Thank you. Patrick, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate this.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time with us.
Honestly, Saints and Warriors is a beautiful film.
Oh, thank you.
How did it come to be? Where did it come from?
Yeah, well, the film really came from my experiences growing up there and wanting to tell this type of story about my people. So I'm from Skidigate, and I even though I didn't play basketball growing up, it's something that was foundational to pretty much everyone in the community, including myself. And I met my soon-to-be producer, Michael Grand, about 3 years ago, and he asked me if I was to work on my first ever debut feature, what would I want it to be? And I immediately knew it was a story of Haida Gwaii, the Haida people, and in particular, how basketball was this central force for so many parts of what's made us a strong culture these days.
That's incredible. Yeah, can we talk about that? What in a community like am I saying it right? Is
Skidigate, yeah.
Skidigate? Um, I mean, the Saints have an incredible legacy there, obviously, but Um, what does that do for a community? What is it that the this particular team does for the whole area?
Well, what the Skidigate Saints represent is our community coming together. It's of course on Haida Gwaii we have multiple communities, including Old Masset to the north, which are cousins, and we kind of take turns every other decade when it comes to success. But what the Skidigate Saints do in our community is it brings people together. It brings elders, kids, the president of the Haida Nation with people who work as grocery store clerks. It's a unifier in so many different ways that just connects our people. And that goes right back to when Indigenous people on the North Coast started gathering for basketball in the 40s and 50s, when it was illegal for us to gather due to Canada's Indian Act and gathering laws. And so sport was one of the most powerful and effective tools for allowing us to reconnect after decades and generations of segregation.
I wanted to ask you about that too, because this film talks about the Indian Act and its effect on the community and the devastating effects of it. But I wondered if in this way, are these games a sense of a source of rebellion against that, or pushing back against that? Is it like you said, it's about bringing that community together after being told you can't be together?
Yeah, 100%. When this first started, I think it was some people could view it as just an outlet for sport and activity. And I think that's the way that it was able to thrive in those early days. But really, when you look at how the All Native operates, which the proto version of the tournament started in 47 during the gathering laws, it was the first time that communities in decades were able to come together. We used to have such tight relationships between villages, trading, marriages, potlatches bring people together. But with the potlatch ban and the gathering laws, like we just couldn't do that. And so, really, whether it was a very vocal form of protest, like as some people might see it, it really was an underground form of gathering. So it looked like sport on the surface, but what it really was community and culture thriving in spite of all these pressures working against it.
Yeah, I see that. That's such a powerful thing. It's so beautiful. Um, eh, and I also want to ask you, one of the things that comes up in the film I think is interesting is basketball provides an entry into our culture. Can you talk about that? How is it that these games specifically do that?
When you look at the history of the North Coast in particular, we are renowned traders, artisans, our culture is shared up and down the coast. And we also had, uh, a bit of a scrappy side as well when it came to um, dealing with disrespect or finding ways to reinforce our laws and our protocols. That's like sometimes came out in the form of warring. When you look at reinforcing traditional laws, and when, whether people need to make things right after certain actions. We needed outlets to be able to get that physicality out. I think basketball was a really great tool in that regard. We jokingly say it's modern day warfare, but it is a sense of that rekindling that rivalry, but it's a healthy rivalry. And this has been since time immemorial between villages and chiefs and clans. This is a modern way to do that in a very physical way, and at the same time allows the cultural elements to really shine as well. If you go to the All Native, not only do you get amazing food and you can purchase beautiful art, or you can share in song and ceremony, but when you look at the opening ceremonies in particular, it's kind of like the Olympics, where you have all these different nations coming out in their regalia, singing song and dance. It's such a powerful reaffirmation that not only did we survive the past 150 years of colonization on the coast, but we're still thriving and we're moving forward. So when I think about the role that basketballs play, that our tournaments play, it was a way to keep our cultural practices visible and alive, especially when we lived through decades of not being able to do that, not being able to put our stuff and who we were out into the world because it was made illegal.
Yeah, it's incredible. Like I said, it's not just about coming together. It's the every game that we see here is a celebration in such beautiful ways. Like there's something more going on in these communities
Mhm.
in the footage that we see. Um, I wanted to ask you too about about these players and because it is this, especially in Skidigate, the community here is so fascinating. I love that it's like all players truly from there, and there's this tension and with Burnaby and whatnot. Um, but we see that this tradition being handed down of basketball and of winning. And I wondered, how that affects a community like this. Like, how is it that like we see some of these players have been doing it for 10, 15, even maybe 20 years they've been playing for this team. How does that help the community as a whole, whether or not they're on that, whether or not they're on the Saints?
Yeah. Well, the Saints, like the team itself, and there's multiple versions of the team. Like we're looking at the seniors team that we follow in the film, and that's basically 20 to 35. You have the older division, which are the Masters, which is 35 and up, which most of the Skidigate Saints senior team should be age-wise in the Masters division, but they're still playing strong. You have the intermediates, which is basically teenagers up to 20, and then you have the women's division as well. Um, and you've got the players, of course, who represent huge swaths of the village, but then you also have, I think, who are just as important, if not much more important. It's the fans, it's the community members, it's the ladies in the community, it's the cheerleaders, it's the people who are fundraising. What the Saints does for the community as a whole, it rallies us towards a common cause, especially these days where we have television, we have the internet, there's so much noise and distraction that's been infiltrating all of our homes. Like we don't gather in the same way that we used to, even from when I was a kid. And when I think about what basketball does, it's one of those few instances that actually gets everyone together and coming together in that really important way, because gathering is the most important part of who we are. It's how we do everything. And of course, we still gather for other purposes, for business purposes, for potlatches, for feasts. Those, are fairly seldom. And so basketball has become that vehicle for community gathering and reconnecting with our neighbors and keeping those connections and bonds tight when we're living in a world that has so much pressure, um, that's actively working against cultural connection. And when you look at even the place that we gather, like the George Brown Rec Center or any of our gyms, those double as our big houses. Like when the Haida Nation signed monumental land agreements with the province of British Columbia and the Canadian government, all like the premier and the prime minister all came to our basketball gym to sign those agreements. And it's really worked out that that gym and basketball has become such an anchor for almost everything else that comes out in the community.
Mm, mm. Yeah, it's incredible. Um, uh, I was just wondering, have the community has had a chance to see the film and what response you got?
So the first public screening of Saints and Warriors was back in February during the All Native, and we had a lot of people come out to see it. Actually, right next door to the Civic Center where the All Natives played, and we had members of the Burnaby team as well as the Skidigate Saints all come on stage, and like all the teams were there. It was really cool to have that experience. And just thinking a year earlier, we were filming that and went off to a bunch of different film festivals after that before it came home to Haida Gwaii this summer. And I think a big part of that was because we want to make sure, and when I say we, I mean not only myself, but Gwaii, who's in the film as the captain of the basketball team and the president of the Haida Nation, Desi, who's one of our stars. We wanted to make sure the film was just right before we got it home because that was also the middle of basketball season. Everyone's traveling. So it was probably the thing I was most nervous about was how is it going to play at home? That's, of course, the number one audience, the people that I care about most. And I know it played well internationally and across Canada, but what really mattered was playing it back home. So when we did our three screenings, the response was tremendous. The first night in the Skidigate Small Hall, we screened it for a packed house of a few hundred people, and it was a standing ovation by the end of it. And what was even more powerful than the applause was the entire hall with hundreds of people all started singing the Haida national anthem at the top of their lungs. And like, yeah, that just shows what sport and storytelling can do. It's uniting people that may have personal differences or differences in the community, but everyone is pulling for the same thing and proud of that. And so that was the most powerful for me was that moment.
Uh, what an amazing moment,
Mhm,
honestly.
mhm.
That's incredible. Um, I outside of the Haida Nation and outside of Skidigit, what has the response been like there? What do you hope people take away from Saints and Warriors?
Saints and Warriors, I feel, has so many different layers when it comes to the historical, when it comes to the present day sovereignty, when it comes to just the entertainment of watching the basketball games. But when I think about the film and what the takeaway is that I wanted to have, it's of what Haida Gwaii is, that essence.
Mm,
Because Haida Gwaii, I've traveled to over 100 different Indigenous communities all across Canada, the United States, New Zealand, Australia. And in all these places, there's still so much tension between the Indigenous communities and the non-Indigenous communities. And there's very little commonality that we see when you look at basketball, when you look at sport, it's one of the few opportunities where Indigenous and non-Indigenous people get to come together in a way that is healthy, that, sure, it could be in rivalries, but also it's in the good spirit of sport. But when you look at Haida Gwaii, half the population's Haida, the other half is non-Indigenous, and the relationships between our non-Indigenous and our Indigenous communities is so healthy and beautiful. We raise families together, we work together, and what I think that you see there as well is the community of Dodging Geets, Port Clement, Sandspit, Talel, Masset, they all come together in deference and following the leadership of the Haida Nation, recognizing that the Haida are the stewards of the land and have been for over 14,000 years. And, big respect to those communities. It's not a power play. It's just like we respect and we will follow the Haida Nation because we believe that the Haida Nation is going to do good by everyone. And that's what we are proving time and time again, and how we want to manage things for the betterment of all. And even when we move forward with our title cases, it's we don't want to evict a single person because we are building relationships together and we're building a future together. And so, what I think this takeaway coming out of this film I want people to have is to see an example of what reconciliation could look like in this country and in this world. I want people to see that there's a bright future because right now there's so many land claims titles that are being utilized as a way to drum up fear and division when you look at what's happening in British Columbia and Richmond with the Cowichan tribes and what politicians are doing to sow division and fear. I want Saints and Warriors to be an example of what it looks like when we put aside that fear and we actually look at building something healthy and beautiful together. And so that's what I really hope the takeaway is hope and inspiration for what this country could look like.
Honestly, that comes across. This is a film that is very hopeful. There's a strength and resiliency that we see, and also this beautiful, beautiful community celebration of community, which I think is just incredible. Honestly, I know I see we're out of time, but Patrick, thank you so much for the chance to chat about the film. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate it as well. Hawaii.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Have a great day.
Yep, thank you.